Her womb was a garden of thorns and grace. Before I had a name, before the world had heard my first cry, I lived inside a beating prayer. A sacred space that knew both beauty and burden. Her body broke its silence for me. She gave me her sleep, her shape, her smile, and called it joy. She became less so that I could become more. That is a mystery only mothers understand. 9 moons, she carried storms and sunshine. Her ankles swelled, her back ached, her hormones danced like wild drums, but she told the world she felt sunlight. She threw up hope, spat out fear, and swallowed pain like it was breakfast, without a whisper of complaint. She still sang lullabies to my unborn name, rubbing her belly gently, as though whispering a secret to the child who would soon break her body and complete her soul. She wasn't just pregnant. She wasn't just expecting. She was planting a life into the soil of her soul, nurturing it with every heartbeat, every sleepless night, every skipped meal. She wasn't waiting to meet me, she was already loving me from the inside out. Hoping I'd bloom even if she didn't. Even if she broke in the process. And somehow, she smiled. Even when her bones felt like firewood. Even when her face changed, when her clothes stopped fitting, when her breath became short, and her cravings made her strange. She smiled, carried grace and thorns in the same breath, and made room in her body for destiny to grow. They say pain has a sound. But a mother's pain often doesn't. It comes in silence. It grows in patience. It blossoms in a love that can never be explained, only experienced. She worried more than she spoke. She checked her body every day for movement, just to make sure I was okay. She drank bitter herbs, prayed strange prayers, walked slowly, slept uncomfortably, and cried in secret when fear whispered loss. But she still called me a miracle, still dreamed of my face, still bought clothes I hadn't worn yet, imagining who I would become. She became her own doctor, nurse, and counselor. She Googled every strange feeling. She counted kicks, counted days, counted breaths. Each count was a countdown to the most painful joy. And when labor came, with its waves of agony, she didn't run. She roared. She bore. She bled. She broke, and she birthed. In that sacred moment, between life and death, she became the bridge I crossed to enter this world. She paid the toll with pain and offered me to the world with trembling hands and tear-soaked joy. She didn't get medals. No standing ovations. Just a baby in her arms and a universe in her eyes. And still, she whispered, "You're worth it." And the world kept moving, never knowing a goddess had just survived battle. Tell me, who does that but a mother? Her hands were more than hands, expanded. Her hands were more than hands. They were temples of mercy, altars of comfort. Soft as morning bread, yet strong as burnt iron. They bore the script of sacrifice. Blistered by firewood, toughened by washing stones. Cracked by cold harmattan mornings. Yet they cradled us like we were glass angels. Her hands weren't just limbs, they were lifelines. Each wrinkle was a story, a verse in the unwritten gospel. Of motherhood, of struggle, of triumphant love. She didn't need to write poems. Her hands wrote them every day. In kneading flour for chin-chin during Christmas. In spreading groundnut on trays to dry. In sewing our torn uniforms late into the night. By lantern light, while the rest of the world slept. Her hands held the magic of 10 lifetimes. Kneading hunger into hope. Brushing our hair while whispering prayers into our scalps. Tying wrappers with one arm while the other. Balanced a baby and a basin of hot OG. She could slap sense into you and still caress you into calm. She knew when to pinch your ear and when to stroke your cheek. Her hands disciplined, yes, but they never harmed. They guided, shaped, and poured warmth into our growing bones. These were the same hands that cooked, cleaned, mended, shielded, and soothed. And still open to give, even when they were empty. You would say, "Mama, there's no salt in the stew." And without hesitation, she would dig into a tiny bowl, scrape the last crystal, and stretch her hand over fire again. Even when her back ached, her fingers remained loyal. They were stubborn in love, always doing, always giving. But there's more to her hands, so much more. They were maps of a woman who never stopped moving. Who folded her own dreams, and hid them deep beneath her palms. so her children could unfold theirs and let them fly. She wanted to go to teacher's college, once. But her hands were needed in the fields. She wanted to start a small shop by the roadside. But school fees called her name. She held 1,000 unrealized dreams. Not with bitterness, but with pride. Because if we rose, she had risen. Her hands were not taught to rest. They rose before the cock crowed, and did not lower until night wore its thickest mask. And even then, they didn't sleep. They stayed alert, guarding mosquito nets, wiping our tears, pressing down fevers, writing invisible verses across our backs that said, "I'm here. I'm always here." When we had nightmares, her hands found our foreheads before her eyes did. When rain leaked through the roof, she used her hands to shield us from the cold. These hands, they built our lives from scratch. From Akamu to Akara. From sweat to soap. From picking beans one by one to stirring stew for hours. Just to make sure our tongues knew what love tasted like. And oh, those hands made the best jollof rice on Sundays. No restaurant could replicate it. Because her ingredients weren't just tomatoes and spices. They were devotion, patience, and sacrifice. Each spoon carried her soul. Even her silence had hands. When life was too hard for her to speak, her hands did the talking. A pat on the shoulder. A firm grip to say, "Don't give up." A warm squeeze to whisper, "I'm proud of you." When we failed exams, her fingers still held ours. When we got our first jobs, her clapping hands were the first to celebrate. Her pride wasn't loud, but her hands revealed it. She never learned the language of luxury, but her hands taught us abundance. Not of gold or silver, but of giving, serving, enduring. She gave away her peace, so we could sleep in peace. And even when we grew up and traveled far, we still felt her hands on us. In our choices, our values, in every good thing we did. Her hands carried more than chores. They carried burdens. The unpaid bills, the unpaid compliments, the unspoken pain of being a mother. In a world that forgets mothers, we didn't always notice. We thought she was strong by nature. But the truth is, her hands learned to be strong, because they had no other choice. Still, her hands stayed open, never clenched, never bitter. Even when arthritis bent her fingers into twisted branches, they still reached out to hug. They still found ways to lift, even when they could no longer carry. She learned new gestures with old pain. She'd wave, she'd rub, she'd hold on. And now, when I look at my own hands, when they fold clothes, or pack lunch, or clap in joy, or shake in fear, I see hers. Her prints live on. Not in fingerprints, but in legacy. I cradle my own children with her rhythm. I write my name with the strength she taught me. Her hands were more than hands. They were instruments of prophecy. They played our future like strings, strumming survival into our bones. She built kingdoms without bricks. She raised soldiers without guns. And she taught us that softness can be power. And when she raised them to heaven, whether in worship or in weary surrender, even the stars paused to watch. Even the angels knew they were witnessing greatness. If you ever shook her hand, you didn't just touch a palm. You touched a prayer, a promise, a history, a heart. You touched the very blueprint of resilience. So, when you see old hands, worn, wrinkled, weary, bend low, hold them, kiss them, because hands like hers don't come twice. They are handwritten letters from God, delivered to earth in the form of women, who were never meant to be ordinary. Her hands were not just hands. They were home. And in her touch, we found eternity. She never needed to raise her voice. Her silence could echo through the soul, saying more than sermons, speaking volumes where words would fail. There were days when the world was unfair to her, when life poured rain into her spirit, when the weight of the world rested on her frail shoulders. Yet she never screamed, never wailed. She just tightened her lips and folded her pain into prayer. Her silence wasn't weakness. No. It was power. A silent volcano. A song only heaven could interpret. When we thought she was just quiet, she was speaking in the language of angels. She never shouted when we disobeyed. She just looked. That long, piercing look. That pierced deeper than 1,000 canes. It made us sit up. Made us tremble in guilt. Because her silence carried disappointment. And disappointment from her was a storm that swept shame through our bones. She would sit by the window, long after everyone had gone to bed, her hands clasped in her lap, her lips moving slightly, a whisper of prayers, a negotiation with heaven, for her children to live better than she did. That silence, that precious silence, was filled with love and longing and labor. When Papa walked out the door for days, and hunger threatened to tie our stomachs in knots, she didn't curse. She didn't break. She simply adjusted her wrapper, entered the kitchen, and turned leftover bones into broth, hunger into laughter. Her silence was strength, a kind the world rarely understands. When neighbors mocked, when relatives accused her of failure, for not birthing a son quick enough, she smiled. Yet in that smile was thunder restrained. She was a storm wrapped in silk, a battle in bloom, a revolution hiding beneath a headscarf. She didn't argue. She acted. She didn't complain. She conquered. When we fell sick, she didn't cry. Instead, her silence became fire, boiling leaves into medicine, her feet tapping through the night, her breath forming silent pleas. God, let this child live. Even when she was tired, she didn't say, I'm tired. She just stood a little slower, moved a little quieter. But she never stopped. Never. And when bills arrived like uninvited guests, and she had to choose between school fees and feeding, she didn't moan. She merely sold her last gold earring, the one her mother gave her at marriage, just so we wouldn't miss a day in class. That silence, that sacred silence, it was filled with explosions, with symphonies, with sacrifice too holy for sound. She'd hum while cooking, not because she was happy, but to drown the noise of sorrow that danced in her chest. And when her eyes were red from crying, she simply blamed pepper smoke, never letting us see her break. Her silence protected us from knowing just how deep her wounds ran, from realizing she once wanted to give up, pack a small bag and vanish. But each time, her silence held her down like roots, because love made her stay. There were times she wanted to scream, when life mocked her dreams, when her body ached from doing too much with too little, but she swallowed her voice, and let her silence speak through her actions. When Papa's voice thundered through the compound, and the neighbors paused mid-conversation, she didn't answer him with equal fire. No, she cooled the storm with calm. Not because she feared him, but because she feared what anger could teach her children. And so, her silence raised us. It taught us patience. It taught us restraint. It taught us that not all power is loud. We learned that true strength doesn't need applause. That courage is quiet. And that love, real love, can weep in silence and still sing. Her silence was the balm that healed the home, the thread that stitched torn hearts, the glue that held us together, when everything around us was falling apart. Now that she is old, she sits more, talks even less, and I often wonder what goes on in her mind. All the memories, the battles, the silent victories. Her eyes still shimmer with stories untold. And sometimes, as I watch her watch us, I see her reliving decades in just a blink. I want to sit at her feet and say, Mama, speak. But I fear I might interrupt a sacred dialogue between her and the heavens. So I let her silence continue its sermon. And if you ever sit near your mother, whether she's still with you or now among stars, and you remember a time she went quiet, remember this. Her silence was never empty. It was full of protection, of provision, of prayers. Her silence was louder than thunder, more potent than speeches, more healing than medicine. If your mother is still alive, hold her hands. Let her know you understand what she never said. And if your mother now walks in the clouds, close your eyes. You will still hear her. In the stillness, in the peace, in the thunderous silence she left behind. Because a mother's silence is never gone. It becomes the quiet rhythm in your heart that guides you through life, long after her voice has faded. Ask ChatGPT. There was a night. I remember it clear as yesterday. The kind of night where the world folds itself in silence, and even the stars hesitate to blink. Rain danced on our zinc roof like fingers playing a forgotten drumbeat, each drop beating out the rhythm of worry in her chest. The power was out, as it often was. The shadows stretched long and heavy across the walls, and the air was thick with fear. My tiny body shivered, not from the cold, but from a fever so fierce. It seemed to boil my blood. My little chest rose and fell in frantic rhythm. The world was spinning. I remember crying, not from pain, but confusion. Something was wrong inside me, but I didn't have the words. She had just come in from the market, her wrapper stained with palm oil. Her blouse clung to her back with sweat and effort. Her slippers were nearly broken. She was tired, exhausted, in fact. But when she saw my eyes dull with heat, she dropped everything. The nylon bags, the vegetables, the fish, all fell to the floor. She didn't shout. She didn't scold. She just moved, fast, quiet, certain. A lioness whose cub was in danger. She didn't sleep that night. She gave me her sleep. She sat by my side, kneeling on the cold floor, fanning my face with a piece of cardboard that had once been part of a cereal box. I still remember the faded picture on it, a cartoon of a boy holding a spoon. Now it was my wind, my relief, my salvation. She hummed lullabies between whispered prayers. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady like a river, like she knew God would only listen if she was calm. She placed a wet cloth on my forehead, one she dipped in water from the small bowl beside her. She changed it again and again, all night, every time my body shook. She held me like I was made of glass. She rebuked the fever. She talked to it like it was a person. Leave my child. You cannot stay here. Go far. And I believed the fever would listen, because she said it would. Do you know what it means? To give away your own sleep. To sit in darkness, swatting away mosquitoes, with nothing but hope and cardboard. To hold your child in trembling arms, and not even think of yourself. I know because she did it. Not just once, but many times. That night was just one of many. A chapter in a book she never wrote, but lived out, word by word, breath by breath. Her back ached. Her eyes burned. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten dinner, I later learned. But she said nothing. At one point, she whispered, "Take my strength, my son. Let this pain pass into me. Just rest, please rest." Her voice cracked. Her eyes were glassy. She wasn't just tired, she was breaking. But she refused to bend. She fanned me, held me, wiped my body with water, whispered scriptures I barely understood. Words like oil on fire, soothing, powerful, deep. And when I finally fell asleep, she didn't leave. She kept watching, listening to every breath like it was music, waiting for the fever to leave my bones, so peace could return to the room. When dawn crept in like a shy guest, the fever had finally broken. My eyes opened, and the first thing I saw was her face, exhausted but smiling. Her eyes were bloodshot, her cheeks hollow, her body swayed as she stood. But she had won. She always won. And I had lived to see another morning, because she stayed awake all night. When people ask, "What's the bravest thing you've ever seen?" I don't talk about wars or heroes on TV. I talk about that night, in a small dark room, where a mother gave her sleep away. I talk about how she fought fever, with nothing but love, and a fan made of cardboard. How she held me like a prophet holds a vision. Carefully, reverently, urgently. I talk about how she didn't blink, because blinking meant sleep, and sleep meant danger. So, she stared into the darkness, until the darkness left. That night, she gave me her sleep. But not just sleep. She gave me comfort. She gave me protection. She gave me a piece of her soul, so mine could stay. Now, as a grown man, when I lie on a soft bed in an air-conditioned room, and sleep like kings do, I wonder, where did her sleep go? Did heaven collect it? Did angels write it down in golden books of sacrifice? Because if God counts tears, he must count lost sleep too. And if heaven gives crowns, she deserves one, not of gold, but of moonlight, lullabies, and silent strength. So when you think of love, don't just think of roses or chocolates. Think of mothers who gave up their nights so you could see another day. Think of her, because that night she gave me her sleep, and in doing so, she gave me life. When history forgets, let this poem remember. When the world rushes by, too busy to notice, let these words stop time. Let them kneel. Let them sing. Let them weep. Because when a mother breathes, the world is safe. And when a mother departs, the world is never quite the same again. Mama, I don't know how to write you, because no alphabet can carry the weight of your sacrifice. No language is worthy. No poet is ready. You are a hymn that heaven borrowed and sent to earth. A sacred song in human skin. You didn't just raise children. You raised empires. You built character in the fire of hardship. You carved love into the hearts of your children using nothing but tired hands and an unbreakable spirit. Mama, you prayed when we slept. You fasted when we feasted. You stayed awake so our dreams could live. You gave us your portion and called it a blessing. You taught us right from wrong with just your silence. You corrected us not just with words but with your eyes, your example, your life. You held our secrets like sacred texts. You defended us like a lioness guards her cubs. And even when we failed you, you forgave faster than lightning. You loved without conditions. You gave without expectations. You kept showing up, rain or shine, sick or well, tired or strong. You showed the world that motherhood is not weakness. It is divine strength. It is the courage to smile when life has punched you 1,000 times. It is the faith to build a future with nothing but hope and empty hands. Mama, you are the reason we breathe with boldness. The reason we laugh from our bellies. The reason we stand up straight in a world that tries to break us. Because we saw you do it with less. Every scar on your body, every line on your face, every gray strand in your hair, is a badge of honor. The world didn't always clap for you, but heaven did. The earth may not have written your name in marble, but your name is carved into our bones. You are the sound in our silence, the peace in our chaos, the compass in our confusion. Even now, as I write this, if you are gone, I feel you. In the breeze that kisses my face, in the songs that rise in my chest, in the tears that come without warning, in the moments I almost give up, then remember, you never did. And if you're still alive, Mama, I want the world to know you're my greatest treasure. You are the proof that angels wear aprons, that warriors wear wrappers, that heaven lives in humble homes. So let the world bow for you. Let kings and queens read this and be humbled. Let nations rise and recognize that a mother is the first temple, the first miracle, the first nation, the first love, the first God her children ever know. Mama, if no one ever thanks you, let this be your crown. Let this be your parade. Let this be your flowers while you can still smell them. And if you're gone, may these words rise like incense, reach where angels live, and remind the heavens. She was legendary. She was love. She was ours. And when you left, the world didn't just lose a woman. It lost a wonder. Sleep well, Mama. Live long, Mama. Reign forever, Mama. Because you didn't just raise children. You raised the sun. And now the whole world bows for you. If this poem stirred something in your heart, pause and remember the woman who made your heartbeat possible. A mother's love is not a chapter in our lives, it is the ink that writes the story of who we become. To every mother who gave all, and to every soul who carries her legacy, thank you. If your mother is still alive, hold her hand tighter, call her more often, hug her longer. If she's gone, speak her name in gratitude. Let her memory light your way. Comment below where you're watching from and drop red heart, red heart, red heart if your mother is your silent superhero. Don't forget to subscribe for more soul-touching stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to remember how sacred motherhood truly is. Because when a mother breathes, the world is safe.